Alright everyone, we got to talk about North Korea yet again. It seems to be in the news quite a bit lately. They fired off another missile. This one I think traveled like 430 miles. So they're like, oh yeah, it's a decent range on their missile and stuff. And of course everyone reports on it. And they get all the alarmists, they get like orgasmic over it. They want Armageddon. And then other people are saying, well, it's a non-issue. I lean towards the latter. When we're talking about North Korea's actions as a state, we have to remember there will be continuous provocations. What then remains to be determined is it kind of a normal provocation for them over the last decade or 2 decades, or is it abnormal? What North Korea has done in its exchanges with China is abnormal. Them conducting one nuclear test not long ago, and apparently there's activity, it looks like there might be another nuclear test soon, that's abnormal. But a missile test from North Korea is like a regular weekly occurrence. When they come out and say, oh, we're going to do weekly missile tests because screw all of you people, that's not really that far beyond the missile test load that they already had. Like, they were already firing off volleys every month or so. So that's not, it doesn't really escalate the situation because they were already doing these things. Now, if you've already sanctioned a nation and slapped them with all sorts of embargoes, and everyone's already been participating in those sanctions and embargoes for sometimes years at a time, depending on what we're talking about as far as the sanctions go. And the nation says, nah, screw you, we're still going to do the things that caused us to be sanctioned in the first place. Then those are toothless. See, the problem is applying another layer of sanctions. The only difference now is that China is rejecting some of North Korea's coal. Which, yeah, it helps put the screws to their economy, but it hasn't stalled it out. It's not going to collapse Kim Jong-un's regime. Look, they've been through a number of significant famines over the last few decades. And it didn't collapse their culture, it didn't collapse the economy, and it didn't lead to the removal of Kim Jong-un. Things are so partitioned, so authoritarian, and so centralized in North Korea that routine stress in the economic sense, extending even to starvation, is not going to stop Kim Jong-un from governing his nation. So if the goal of the rest of the world is to stop North Korea before it does inevitably get multi-stage nuclear weapons and or delivery systems able to carry them far further than their general region, because then it becomes a matter of necessity to get involved and much more dangerous when you do. If your desire is to stop that from happening, using sanctions won't do it. Obama tried this for 8 years. It didn't work. We've been sanctioning them since the Clinton era at the sort of higher new level of sanctions. For a while there, it's like, okay, it's North Korea, Hermit Kingdom, whatever. They were a non-nuclear state. It didn't matter so much. Now they've got atomic weapons. They're openly proclaiming their intent to gain multi-stage nuclear weapons. How long it takes them is anyone's guess. They're certainly way ahead of the Iranians. We've got all sorts of people all over the world are constantly talking about the need to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age, how evil those Iranians are, despite not actually attacking the nations they supposedly hate. And yet North Korea is constantly threatening openly to do so. It's not like chanting, oh yeah, USA the Great Satan. Okay, well, the Iranians can do that. It doesn't matter. They don't have the ability to attack us. They don't apparently even have an atomic program. What the fuck are they supposed to do? Okay, they held one of our ships hostage on a rare occasion, just for electioneering purposes or something like that. North Korea does far worse than that on a near-daily basis. They continuously threaten to annihilate their neighbors, as well as these much larger states like the US, now China, the Russians. I think Trump, for all of his sloganeering at times when it comes to releasing information like his opinion or some statement on what's going on in the world, for all of the bluster, he's probably totally right when he says, oh, I can't imagine the Russians are happy about this missile test. No, probably not, since Putin just barely came forward and said, yeah, we're going to work on this situation too. You've got the 3 main military powers of the world are basically in line on their view of North Korea, which is they need to calm down, they need to give up their multi-stage nuclear ambitions, and dismantle their atomic program because it's seen as rogue. And not just because it's seen as rogue. Like, if some state that's ultimately pacifistic and otherwise totally in line with world democracy, doesn't really have a problem with anybody, develops an atomic weapon, it worries people considerably less than when North Korea gets one and immediately they test it, and then they say, ha, very soon we will turn Tokyo into ashes. Very soon the South Koreans will feel our wrath. Beijing will fall. All these countries that try to stand in our way, that have ever wronged us in the last century or something, we're going to destroy them off the face of the earth. That's the reason why people are concerned. If some regime that obviously isn't going to use atomic weapons has an atomic weapon, worries people a little bit less. And as I said before, it was funny when they got into a diplomatic row with Israel, because Israel has the Samson option and also is a nuclear power without signing the NPT. And they've got, hundreds of weapons. And some of them are multi-stage. Not all of them. I think some of their weapons are just boosted and they're dropped from planes. It's more on par with what the North Koreans have, only, on steroids. But they do have the ability to launch them via missile as well, at least to an intermediate range within their general region of the world. North Korea doesn't have that capability yet, but it's trying to get it. I think the North Korea probably uses Israel as its basic plan. That is, they realize Israel does things that to any other nation in the world would cause regime change, that would cause direct military intervention, bombing civilians, attacking hospitals and schools, running what amounts to an apartheid state with significant human rights abuses. Now, I guess some people, they're like Israeli nationalists or Israelis themselves on material like this. They say, "Oh no, you've got it all wrong. We're a democracy. Israel's a democracy. We're liberalized and we have gay rights." It doesn't matter. There are significant human rights abuses of groups that technically are kind of sort of part of the same state because there hasn't really been a working partition. When they say, "Oh, we gave the Palestinians the West Bank, look at how wonderful we are," you can't give somebody something that's already theirs. I'm sorry about that. That's just relinquishing your grasp on something that you have taken by force as part of a general war plan in the past. That's not a sane argument to make. The North Koreans see that and they say, well, if they can get away with doing all these things because they got nuclear weapons, and nobody wants to see a nuclear hellstorm in that region of the world, the world oil declines and stuff, we'll gain that ability, and we'll lord it over Japan and South Korea, on one hand, to keep the Americans away from us. We are right next to China and Russia. We can lord it over them more directly, and everyone will leave us alone. We can be our Juche communist, centrally planned state forever, and long live essentially the monarchy of the Kim family, which is exactly what it is. It's a monarchy. You're born into it. Do some of these like socialists and stuff that hold them up kind of on a pedestal and say, oh, well, the evil West is just trying to unseat them because they want imperialist advances further into Asia or something. You do realize that you're talking about a monarchy, right? As in a hereditary line of rulers with absolute power. That's not quite the same thing as the socialism you appear to support in Western countries. Here it's all very family friendly. Oh yes, we want the Nordic model. It's socialism with a smiley face. Over there it's socialism with a frowny face, but that's still okay. We'll still make a blog post about how great Kim is, because it's the evil imperialist West's fault. It's like I saw a post by the U.S. Commie Party put out a little release on Venezuela, and you read the article, it's just the funniest shit that you'll ever read. It's like, oh, the evil imperialists are trying to unseat the Bolivaran revolutionary body, and the people of the socialist Venezuelans must rise up to stop the extreme right within their country from taking hold because of workers' rights and stuff. Yeah, workers. You don't have many workers, you don't really have an economy, but they ignore that point conveniently within the text of their article. Some funny stuff. Yeah, communists tend to be incoherent individuals, or they wouldn't be communists. It's sort of a prerequisite to being a communist, generally. But North Korea, when they conduct a missile test, don't get your panties in a wad, because that's par for the course. They've been doing that for years. It's when they conduct a nuclear test, or fire something into South Korea, like, you know, when they shelled those islands years ago, or they shut down Kaesong, something that's more outside of the norm for the provocations that we're used to for North Korea, that's when you can sit there and turn on, you know, your shortwave feed and start talking about World War III or something. It's very funny. And by the way, it won't cause World War III, what's happening in Korea. It'll cause a regional war, which will largely involve every other country in the region curb-stomping Kim Jong-un. If it comes to blows, North Korea fails. They're not going to get defending by the Chinese. The Russians are not going to move in and say, oh yeah, the Chinese keep having so many problems with North Korea. We'll take them on as a vassal just to screw around with the Western world. It wouldn't make any diplomatic sense whatsoever, and it certainly wouldn't make economic sense. What the fuck are they supposed to do with those minerals? They don't have the kind of manufacturing that China has to do anything with them. It'd be worthless. They need oil, not coal anyway. So, yeah, it's not World War III because North Korea fires off a missile, but you wouldn't know that. You go the weird side of YouTube with some of the more conspiratorial, like, Nibiru minds of the YouTube world, and they're all saying, oh, it's the eve of destruction. Very soon atomic weapons will rain down on U.S. cities. Kim Jong-un. Yeah, I guess they imagine he has like hundreds of long-range nuclear weapons or something. He doesn't. He barely has a functioning air force. Some of those planes, people have, they've had pictures of them. They're like dilapidated. They can't even get off the fucking ground, let alone fly around in the air. That's what North Korea is. But they do have atomic weapons, and we need to keep that in mind, I think, over time. That's about all. Peace out.